Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and we have a jam-packed show on tap for you today. Should the Texans consider cutting Robert Woods? We'll get into that in just a moment. And on the back half of today's show, 5 remaining free agents that I think are fits for the Houston Texans that could fill some holes that they really need in their roster. I'll tell you who those 5 are at the end of today's show. But let's get right into the meat of today's program. Should the Texans be cutting wide receiver Robert Woods? He's on the last year of his contract, and he's turning 32 this season. The Texans have been notably wanting to upgrade at wide receiver this offseason. So do they end up just cutting Robert Woods? I mean, he was okay this past season for the Texans. He was serviceable. But with the emergence of Nico Collins, and you have Dell, then other guys on the roster, and if the Texans go ahead and draft another wide receiver, or if they sign one of these guys off the free agent market, where does that leave Robert Woods on this depth chart? And the numbers are, you don't really save a ton, but you don't end up really having to lose a lot either. The dead cap would be $4.75 million. The cap savings would be $5 million. So I'm going to ask you plain and simple, what do you think? Because I've heard a lot of people with differing opinions in the comment section. Will the Texans cut Robert Woods? This isn't, do you want them to cut them? This is, what do you think they will do? Do you think they'll end up cutting Robert Woods? Give me a yes, give me a no down in the comment section. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's video. So you get an ad break here on YouTube, perfect timing. Go down to the top question or the top comment on today's video and answer today's question. I think if they draft a wide receiver, he's gone for sure. There's no way you keep Robert Woods on this roster with all these other guys that you're trying to groom into the next wide receiver core for this unit. We look at the wide receivers that they have on the roster right now. They re-signed Noah Brown, so he's your wide receiver 3, in my opinion, going into this next season. Nico Collins is your 1. Tank Dell is your 2. Then you have a slew of guys down there like Robert Woods, John Metchie, Xavier Hutchinson, and Alec Bachman and Wayne, who are 2 practice squad guys. But really, I want to focus on the 2 guys that are, rookies from last season. Xavier Hutchinson, they drafted him out of Iowa State. He got a little bit of playing time towards the end of last season. So are you going to play Robert Woods over him, especially when you don't really need Robert Woods on this team? Same thing with John Metchie. He got a little bit more run towards the end of last year too. So if they're trying to let Metchie prove himself, who are you going to give the reps to? Because you have your top 3 guys solidified, in my opinion, at least right now before you add somebody in Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Noah Brown. Who are you going to give those 4th and 5th reps to? Are you going to give it to Xavier Hutchinson and John Metchie, or are you going to give it to an older guy in Robert Woods who's on the last year of his contract? I just don't think it really makes sense for the Texans to keep a guy like Robert Woods. He was okay last year. He's a descending player. I say you cut your losses and you try to see if these young guys can prove themselves. And this wide receiver class in this draft is absolutely loaded with talent. So the Texans are more than likely going to throw a dart at the board and get one of those wide receivers maybe in round 2, round 3, round 4, maybe even round 5. But still, this wide receiver group is very talented. So are you going to take away any snaps from a guy like that to keep a guy like Robert Woods? I don't really think that is a smart move for the Houston Texans. So I think they end up cutting Robert Woods maybe during OTAs or in the preseason. Now, coming up, I have 5 more free agent fits for the Houston Texans because the cap numbers just came out, and Texans, they have a little bit more cap space to play with, especially if they do cut a guy like Robert Woods. I'll get into that in just a moment, but today's show is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Football season, it may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, which the Rockets, they're hot right now. They could be fighting for a play-in spot in the NBA playoffs. There's no shortage of high-stakes basketball at this time of year, and it's the perfect time to get in on the excitement with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. Now, I won't lie, college basketball, I am a guy who is a very casual, so I talked to one of our experts here at Chat Sports, one of our hoop heads who loves college basketball, and he gave me this PrizePicks that he said that y'all should play. He has Milan, not even going to try that last name, from Iowa State, more than 10 points. He balled out in the pass game. I do know that. Dalton Connect, 20.5 points for Tennessee. He said, give me the more on that. And Marcus Marcus Damask, 16.5 points. He's saying give him the less. You can use these picks or you can fade these picks during March Madness. Just do it over on PrizePicks. And PrizePicks, they are the #1 daily fantasy sports after. It's as easy as picking 2 or more players, like I just showed you, and choosing more or less on their projected stat types. And they have a reboot policy. So the guy that you picked gets injured in the first half, they do not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So what's stopping you? Go get started today over at prizepicks.com/CLNS. Code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Now, I mentioned the Texans. They do have a little bit of cap space to play around with. The new numbers coming in today after the Foley Fotokasi deal, those numbers were finalized. He got a $5 million deal, so Texans think really highly of Fotokasi. And also, the other deals kind of went through for Texans in free agency, leaving them with $20.3 million in cap space. So they can definitely make another splash in free agency if they so choose to. Why not one of these 5 guys that I'm about to mention? Justin Simmons. I've been pounding the table for the Texans to look into getting this safety, a former All-Pro for the Denver Broncos, and he still has a lot of game left in him. This past season, 70 tackles, 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups for the safety from Denver. I mean, he's a huge talent. He's a guy that is going to be a captain of your defense if you sign him. He's a ball hawk too. The past 3 seasons, 3 interceptions, 6 interceptions, 5 interceptions. He has a nose for the football. You can get a guy like Justin Simmons on your squad. That'll be a big up for this Texans defense. The next guy, maybe surprise you a little bit, Michael Gallup, wide receiver formerly of the Dallas Cowboys. And I know what we just said on the top half of the show about Robert Woods and how are there going to be enough snaps for everybody who's available? Well, maybe bringing in Michael Gallup won't help that. But if you don't trust your younger guys like a John Metchie, like a Xavier Hutchinson, if you don't really want Robert Woods again, why not take a shot on Michael Gallup if it is really cheap? Now, this is only if it's a very cheap deal is where I would get Michael Gallup. But we go back to 2020, he's good. Like, whenever he's on the field, he is very good. His only problem, the past 2 seasons, 9 games played, 14 games played, is he really hasn't been able to get on the field. This past season, 17 games played and really wasn't able to get that connection back with Dak Prescott. He really focused on guys like CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks more than Michael Gallup. So if you could get a guy like this on the cheap, an upside guy, he's still 28 years old, I think that would be a decent signing for the Houston Texans. This next guy up, Connor Williams, offensive lineman last year for the Miami Dolphins, also another former Cowboy player. Only played 9 games this past season, 1 sack allowed, but per PFF, he was one of the top-rated centers in the league whenever he was playing. So he is a really good option on the interior, and he's also played all along the offensive line. So this gives you depth not only at the center position, but at the guard positions as well. And I just don't know what the Texans are going to do with this offensive line. This is where I have the depth chart right now. Kenyon Green, former first-round pick. He got hurt in preseason this past year, was out for the entire year on IR. Does he come back and claim that left guard spot? Does Juice Scruggs move over to center and is your starting center? Or is Jarrett Patterson a guy that's going to move over and reclaim that center spot? A late-round pick that really played well last season before getting injured. So I really wonder that center spot. Who's going to play? Is it Juice Scruggs, Jarrett Patterson, or could it be somebody they draft or sign in free agency? What do you think? Who do you think plays center? Juice Scruggs, I kind of was drafted to play center, but ended up playing left guard last year. Well, Michael Dieter played center. So I don't know if they really want to move him back to center, but what say you? If you think it's Juice Scruggs, type JS, Jarrett Patterson, type JP, or if you think it's somebody else is going to play center, type O down in the comments section. Let me know, who do you think plays center next season for the Houston Texans? Next up, defensive tackle. I've been saying Calais Campbell a ton, but now that the money came out for Foley Fotokasi, I don't think they spend a lot of money at defensive tackle this offseason. So why not get a guy on a cheap deal like a Teair Tart? He has yet to be picked up, and the Texans brought him over from the Tennessee Titans this past season, and he played pretty decently for the Texans on that little playoff push they had this past year. So he could be another guy that you're looking at, maybe not going to break the bank, could be another cheap deal on the interior, but if you still need some more depth at the defensive tackle spot, Teair Tart is another good option. And at cornerback, I keep on saying it, and it's the same guy over and over again, and I know it might get boring, but I really would like the Texans to look into getting Xavier Howard. He was last on my list because, and I almost put another position there because they went ahead and they signed Jeff Okudah. They went ahead and they signed C.J. Henderson. So do they want to sign another cornerback in free agency before the draft? I don't necessarily think so, but if they do, Xavier Howard, he's a Houston guy. He wants to come home. He would be a really good cornerback 2 option opposite of Derek Stingley. He's very experienced, has had a lot of success at the cornerback spot, at the outside cornerback spot, which the Texans need. They already have their one outside corner in Derek Stingley. They have their nickel in King. They just need that other outside corner. And I think Xavier Howard could fit that perfectly. Him, also Steven Nelson, also Stephon Gilmore, all still free agents that the Texans could look into. But I think a lot of these teams are saying, hey, we want to wait until the draft, see who we're able to get. And if we're not able to get our guy at corner, then I'll go sign a Xavier Howard. I think that might be the way a lot of these teams are thinking because a lot of these corners are still yet to be signed, and they might be waiting for the NFL draft. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want to follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Chuggs, let me know what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on free agency, the draft for the Houston Texans? My DMs are always open. And as always, go down and hit that sub button for daily Texans news and rumors content. We're the fastest growing Texans channel on YouTube, so you don't want to miss the wave. You don't want to be the guy who was like, oh, I should have subscribed whenever they were at 12,000. Be that guy. Go down and hit that sub button for daily Texans content.